Well, hello, fellow radioheads from the Western Outpost in Salt Lake City. This is Michael, and we're going to talk today about one of the coolest radios I've ever had a chance to work on. This is a Grunow model 1561. Now, if you look this up in Writers, and it's Writers book numbers, volume number 7, page 37 is where it begins. It calls it a 1541. In fact, the schematic shows a 1541. But if you look inside the cabinet on this, it has 1541 actually crossed out and 1561 typed next to it. So your guess is as good as mine. So for today, I'm going to go with the 1561, and I could be totally off base. But this is a 15-tube radio, and man, is it cool. It's built like a tank, and it was built by, of course, Grunow, and of Majestic fame, and fierce competitors of Zenith. This is a beautiful high-fidelity radio, and it has some distinct characteristics that many radios don't have. For example, it has a separate audio channel for high frequency and low frequency. So it has two audio output channels. One is push-pull, and that's for the low frequency. The other one is single-ended for the high frequency. And I'll show you those in just a minute. All three of those were driven, both channels were driven by 6F6 output tubes. This radio has a beautiful cabinet, simple and understated, really nice cabinet, really well made, just a very cool radio. I'm going to go into the Teledial thing once I've turned it on, but I wanted to have you get a look at it first. So let's go ahead and give this a whirl, shall we? Let's see, here we go. Turn it on, you see the lights coming up. And it takes a minute. Now I used a current limiting CL90 thermistor, so it adds just a little bit of time in the amount of time it takes for this thing to heat up and get playing. There we go.
By 30%.
Now naturally I can't stay on a station very long because I don't want to get dinged for copyright infringement. But this is a local station. And let's go ahead and tune this. Now watch this.
Pours billions of dollars into education.
Watch this really cool dial as I tune. Check that out. The whole dial, the outer rim, basically the escutcheon, turns with the tuning mechanism. And it kind of looks like a telephone dial. I think that's where they came up with the Teledial. It's really a neat design. So let's go back and find some stations. I'm at one end of the dial as it is.
We are near the hospital in Murray. Call us at 801-26.
Back from Canada. Remember John Left?
Yeah.
I kind of like John Left. Hurricane Sandy put it up.
Now there's going to be a bit of noise in this room because I have a lot of fluorescent lights going. Now on this radio,
I would have thought that the Holy Spirit would be coming in some way, shape, or form.
there is a fidelity control, which is basically a tone control, but also a sensitivity control. Makes a bit of noise when I go from one position to the other there. I don't know why. I've cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned this thing, and I finally just said, well, there's only so much I can do to get that taken care of.
Certainly part of what the woman represents is Mary, because she gives birth to Jesus in that vision. And so
There you go. So there's the bass, and that's less sensitive. You basically widen the response curve to increase the sensitivity as you move toward the middle of the fidelity control. Then, of course, when you come back out here toward the treble, it winds up narrowing it again. So I'm not quite sure how it works. I haven't studied it yet, but I will. And then you have your range switch. And watch the lights as I change the range switch. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. There's a green light toward the bottom. When I change it, there goes, that's for the low end of the shortwave. And there's for the high end of the shortwave. And there's for the really high end of the shortwave. And I've listened to all of the shortwave. They all work really well. And they got good reception, although I did need a much longer antenna than I have connected out here in my wood shop. Now, of course, this has automatic frequency control. It's really kind of cool. It uses a discriminator similar to old FM stuff But I haven't studied that part of the circuit either. This guy needs this radio here in a couple of days, so I had to kind of get it done. But you basically, if you want the frequency control, it works with the dial so that you get close to it with the presets, and then it locks in on the station. Otherwise, you just listen to it on standard. And now here's how the teledial works. Pretty cool. When you say you have a station set up in the teledial, you push the button in. Notice how it kills the sound. See that? There's a set of contacts in here that defeats the sound, most of the sound, defeats most of the audio signal as you push the button. So you push it in, you turn this, it's very mechanical, and it hits a stop. And there you go. So you want to do another one? Hits a stop. Now you may be noticing this crack right here on the dial glass. Unfortunately, that happened yesterday when the customer was bringing back the escutcheon and he dropped it and cracked it. I have a new one on the way. So there you go. That's how the teledial works. It's really a pretty novel idea. It feels kind of weird when you're using it, though. All right, so let's take a look at the back of this machine, shall we? I'm going to get better. I'm currently building a turntable so I can turn the radio rather than walk around it. But here's the inside of this thing, and I have another part of the videos look at the chassis when it was still on the bench. But there it is operating. Beautiful, beautiful chassis. And check out those speakers, man. You see that bass speaker, and you see the two high-frequency speakers, and they both have speaker connections, and they're all field coil speakers, and they're all wired into the radio separately through these connectors. And look at the size of that transformer. This is no Zenith black dial, my friends. This thing has a beefy transformer that, as long as you take care of the radio, you don't have to worry about. Has 3 IF stages, as I mentioned in another part of the video, and 3 IF transformers, and it has radio. It has an RF stage, and there is the tag that I talk about. That has, you can see the 1541 crossed out and the 1561 typed next to it. So what do I call it? Well, I'll call it what it says there on the radio itself, 1561. Now here's something curious. This thing came with a fuse. I usually install a fuse, but the funky thing about this is you don't want to touch that fuse. I've done that. I know how it feels. I don't intend to do it a second time. So that's something I'll have to let the owner know about if this thing's going to be around children. Now here's one other cool feature about it. Suppose you want to see what difference the two different channels are doing, the high frequency or low frequency channels, how they change the sound. Well, let me turn the volume up a little bit and I'll show you. See if I can reach around the front here. There we go. Now check this out. That took out the high frequency, if you hear that. Okay, so now you know the high frequency is working and how it works. There you took out the low. Pretty cool. How useful it is, I'm not quite sure. I mean, you can determine the same thing, I suppose, with the tone control, but there you have it. It's a pretty neat device. And as I mentioned, it's a pretty cabinet. Real nice, real well-built radio. There was a small crack right there in the rear corner of the cabinet that I screwed back together and otherwise left it alone. And I think the owner's going to be happy with this radio. Check out that tuning mechanism. When you tune this thing, that whole thing moves. Check that out. Is that cool or what? There you see all the dial lamps. So there you go. A 1937, I believe, Grunow model 1561 or 1541, not quite sure. All right. That's all I have.